Under what authority do you refer to?
In Section 1182F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was the statutory provision that was at issue in Trump v. Hawaii.
That was one of the dumbest questions that I think anybody's asked on the Hill in a long time.
Welcome to No Border, No Country, joined by Judge Matt O'Brien. Matt, what have you been up to lately?
Just spreading joy up on the Hill, Brian.
Well, in case anyone wonders whether my co-host here is a certified immigration expert, he was called to Capitol Hill recently to testify before a House committee. And in typical Matt O'Brien fashion, you were like a church mouse and nothing happened and it was just totally boring, right?
Exactly.
Actually, the opposite is true. He was all over the news the next day. He had a interesting exchange with the congressman that we're going to look at. And I thought it revealed a lot about what Congress does and doesn't know about the immigration problem we have right now.
Yeah, I think it was pretty shocking how little some of the members understand about this. I also thought it was interesting because Representative Goldman, the member who asked the question that triggered all of this, showed up late and is actually an attorney himself, and I believe was a prosecutor in New York, and didn't seem to understand how the Immigration and Nationality Act works in terms of the president's authority to manage the border. So,
yes. Well, let's let this play out. Let's not give it away, but this is some interesting video here. So this is Judge Matt O'Brien and Congressman Dan Goldman from New York talking about the problems we're having in this country as relates to immigration and why certain things have been done or haven't been done. So let's see what he has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank our witnesses for being here. I just came in a minute ago, Mr. O'Brien, but you said that the president has the authority to shut down the border right now. Under what authority do you refer to?
As I said, Section 1182F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was the statutory provision that was at issue in Trump v. Hawaii. It's a provision that allows the president by proclamation to temporarily suspend the admission of certain classes of aliens into the United States.
So why didn't Donald Trump use that?
He did. That's why the Trump v. Hawaii case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
But then why was it relied on Title 42?
Well, there was a pandemic on. I mean, Title 42 is pitched at a very different set of circumstances. It's specifically at a public health crisis. 1182F is pitched at a general power to manage the border in confrontation of a crisis.
Okay, so I think you did a great job of restraint and decorum there and giving a very clinical answer. But now that we're in a more loose setting, what was going on there and what would you say to him now in a less restrictive format?
Well, so first of all, I wish that this, that looked great because it was all just my brilliance. But that was one of the dumbest questions that I think anybody's asked on the Hill in a long time. And given the number of dumb questions being asked up there these days, that's saying something. So Representative Goldman showed up late. Apparently, he had no idea that 8 U.S.C. 1182F is a section of the Immigration and Nationality Act that gives the president the authority to suspend the admission of all or any classes of aliens into the United States as either non-immigrants or immigrants, green card holders, because he has made a determination that their entry would not be in the interests of the United States. Now, the people who would prefer to have open borders and have what's going on now happening sued President Trump over that. It was a group of academics in Hawaii who I believe had trouble getting H-1B and F-1 and some other visa classifications. And they basically said that Congress has put into place a framework for immigration and the president cannot mess with that framework, so that the Supreme Court should read very narrowly the section 1182F of the act. And of course, the Supreme Court said no. Their exact words were that 1182F F exudes deference to the President of the United States and charges him with making determinations about when it would not be in the interest of the United States to admit all aliens or certain groups of aliens, lets him decide how long to put the restrictions in place and under what circumstances they will be lifted. And that's about as straightforward a Supreme Court opinion as I've ever read in 30 years of practicing law.
Now, you mentioned it at the top. Well, I think it's important to understand who this guy is. In case some people say, well, he was just misunderstood or misinformed about what these things are. We're talking about one of the most hyper-partisan members of Congress. This is someone who's a staunch defender of the current administration, despite all evidence to the contrary. He's not ignorant. He knows what's going on, but I mean, how do you explain this otherwise? Is he just trying to get you in a gotcha moment, or what's going on there?
Yeah, he was trying to get in a gotcha moment. And if anybody has seen the Red State article, apparently there was a reporter from Red State that was present in the hearing. He has a history of this, but he's missed the key part. Before he goes for the gotcha moment, he hasn't figured out what's right and what's wrong. And so he came into the hearing late. He missed the exchange about this that went on earlier with a number of the other members. And he apparently never bothered to read Trump v. Hawaii or any of the relevant portions of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And I think it's important to note this guy is a former prosecutor. He is an attorney. I don't know where he went to school, but he's the heir to the Levi Strauss jeans fortune, I believe. And so I'm pretty sure he didn't go to Joe's Greasy Law Shack outside of Detroit somewhere. I'm thinking he probably went to a fairly well-known and reputable law school. What they actually taught him there, I'm not sure. You've known me a long time. I can get a little bit salty when confronted with stupid questions.
No, not you.
And that question was so dopey, it actually threw me for a loop. I was relatively mild in responding to him, not just because I was on the Hill, but because I couldn't believe that he actually asked the question that dumb.
Well, you mentioned that he just walked in. I think it's important for people to understand, if you've never been at a congressional hearing in person like that, I was sitting behind your right shoulder there in the video, but with the exception of the ranking members and just one or two others, everyone else is not there when it starts as far as the members of the committee. They kind of breeze in and out as their time to question you comes up. So they're not sitting through the whole hearing. They don't hear the people before them. They're really looking for their own 5 minutes of camera time, and then they're kind of out of there. So they're not really glued into the testimony and paying attention as far as from start to finish.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, these things are pretty open. This was a subcommittee of the larger House Oversight and Accountability Committee. And, we had a recess for 20 minutes, a half an hour, so they could actually go to votes. And so all of the members who are sitting on these committees are doing other types of business, sometimes with other committees, sometimes meetings and things. So they have a tendency to pop in and pop out. There's also what's called a waive-on policy, so that people who aren't standard members of the committee can become ad hoc members of the committee, and they just simply let the chair know that they want to waive in, and they're accepted to become a member of the committee for the purposes of asking a question or two or sitting in on a whole hearing. So this is not like some of the select committee hearings or judiciary committee hearings, some of the bigger committees that people see on C-SPAN, where the entire set of seats for the members are filled and they go for 3 to 4 hours nonstop. This is a little bit of a different setup.
This wasn't the Clarence Thomas Anita Hill hearing. It was...
No, thank God.
So the other clip I wanted to look at here, Matt, this is a Congressman Pat Fallon from Texas, and he's questioning another panelist on the witness table there. This is Jason Hauser, and he worked with ICE. What was his position, do you recall?
He was the chief of staff at ICE, and he's an interesting part of the government phenomena here inside the Beltway. To my knowledge, he's had no experience whatsoever in anything connected with immigration. It came up during the hearings if he'd ever been a law enforcement officer. He said no, he doesn't have any background in immigration. He was a military officer. And chief of staff positions here in the D.C. area are kind of like they're an administrator who's responsible for keeping the front office staff at an agency going. And so they'll deal with everything from labor and employment to logistics to paperwork requirements. It's kind of a catch-all job. there seems to be a very high proportion of these people who come from the military with some kind of an administrative or logistical background in the military. And my hat's off to all of the veterans. My wife is an Army veteran. I'm very proud of her. I don't mean to be undermining veterans, but the fact that you've been in combat or have a military skill doesn't mean that you necessarily know anything about immigration law or border control. And that was clearly the case here.
So this is Congressman Fallon questioning Hauser, and he's asking him about Alejandro Mayorkas, whose performance has been well dissected on this program.
Yeah, I think Fallon's a big fan of good old Uncle Ali.
Yeah, so let's have a look here at this exchange.
Last year, 53,000, an increase of 2,650%. If just 1% of them are sleeper agents, because most of them are military-age men, I shudder to think what will happen in a free and open society if they invade Taiwan and those agents are activated. 170 countries represented by illegal crossers. Cost probably $155 billion. Opioid deaths have doubled. And our national security is at risk because we don't know who these people are. And Mr. Hauser, you also said that you believe that Secretary Mayorkas was a stalwart advocate for the men and women of our immigration and enforcement agencies.
Every day.
Stalwart advocate.
Every day.
Does a stalwart advocate lie about, excuse me, do the stalwart advocate lie about what happened? Were any Haitian migrants whipped by Border Patrol agents? No, they were not. But you know what? It's interesting because he got an email saying just that. You know what he said? Our nation saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are. We know those images painfully conjured up the worst elements of our nation's ongoing battle against systemic racism. I didn't know that controlling a horse with reins had anything to do with systemic racism. And then he said to see people treated like that, they did, horses barely running over people, being strapped, it's outrageous. Was anybody strapped?
Sir, I'd have to direct you to
No one was strapped, Mr. Hauser. Chief Raul Ortiz, too. Everyone that was there said that didn't happen. And that lion SOB said it anyway, and he threw his Border Patrol agents under the bus. I don't think that fits my definition of stalwart advocate. The guy's a bum, and I'm glad he got impeached. And he got impeached because he richly deserved that. So you're a compassionate man.
Stalwart advocate, Matt. Care to weigh in on that one?
When he was the director of USCIS, I worked directly with Alejandro Mayorkas. He insisted that everyone call him Ali, like he was everyone's buddy. And he was one of the most unpleasant, backstabbing human beings that I've ever had the misfortune to meet. So, stalwart advocate, I don't know where Hauser's coming from. He must have been the one that offered Hauser the job. Therefore, in Hauser's mind, he's a stalwart advocate. I would tend to agree with the Lion SOB characterization that Mr. Fallon engaged in.
Apparently, this is the kind of guy who's a ladder climber in Washington in this administration, because when you can see something so clearly and see the evidence that the photographer of those pictures that he referred to said that is not what happened, and then for him to be called on and just have deer in the headlights and can't answer what's plain obvious to everyone, isn't that amazing that these are the people that move up in the world in this town?
Yeah, it's astounding. But, Mayorkas is also a perfect example of that. I mean, I was not a Border Patrol agent. I didn't ride a horse when I worked for the government. But I know that those Border Patrol horses are trained police horses. The agents that are riding those horses can tap the horse on the haunches, and the horse will gently put its foot down on top of a person's foot to hold them in place. And what they were doing that the press tried to turn into strapping people was one of the ways that they control those horses is by twirling the reins. So that while they're in motion, the horse knows how to fluidly go in one direction or another, which is what they were doing. But Ali Mayorkas, instead of defending the people that worked with him, saw an opportunity to advance critical race theory and turn this into some kind of an incident where the Haitians were being attacked because they're black, completely forgetting that this was a group of Haitians about to riot when they had been told that they could not cross over the border and had to remain under a bridge on the U.S. side of the border, but weren't going to be permitted to enter the U.S. until they were properly processed. And the Border Patrol did exactly what it was supposed to do. It defended the border. Meanwhile, the guy who's the head of the agency that's charged with defending the border is trying to undermine the people who worked for him and who were doing exactly the job that the taxpayers have paid them to do. And I would respectfully say that, I don't know whether Hauser was good, bad, or indifferent military officer. The way he was talking during the hearing, he must have had some experience, was fairly high ranking. He probably should have stuck to that and left immigration to the experts.
I think it should be noted, too, the way these hearings go, the one party picks some of the witnesses and then the other party picks at least one other witness. Hauser was the Democrats' witness, correct?
Yeah, he was the Democrat witness. Typically in a hearing like this, for this size and length of time, the majority party on the committee gets to pick two witnesses, and then the minority party gets to pick one as a rebuttal witness. But it was an odd hearing. The Democrats seemed hesitant to ask me any questions. I would have liked to given a few more of them the Goldman treatment, but they didn't want to ask. And I think that's evidence of the fact that they do not have a leg to stand on this particular issue. And most of the questions that were asked by the Democrats really didn't have anything to do with border issues. They were more general policy questions. And it was more like, well, we didn't break the border and we don't have any legislative authority to fix it. And, which is really them saying, we did break the border, we did it on purpose, and we don't want to fix it.
It was also interesting that just weeks ago, some of those members of that committee were denying that there was a problem. The border's secure, it's not a problem, things to that effect. And now when the polling comes out or the public opinion shows that the public is very concerned about this, now they're getting religion, essentially. They're saying, well, we got a problem, we got to fix this. It's just so transparent.
Well, I mean, these are a bunch of ideologues. Garcia is clearly an open border person. For him, I think he sees it as a racial issue, and not letting migrants in is anti-Hispanic or anti-brown people are, one of these red herrings that the open borders contingent goes off on all the time. Jamie Raskin was there. He was, I believe, when he was a city councilman in Tacoma Park, Maryland, was the person that floated the idea of illegal alien voting, because in his way of thinking, illegal aliens, despite the fact that they have no authorization to be here, are members of the community. They're residents. Therefore, Brian, they should be able to vote on things like school board elections and municipal dog catcher elections and so on and so forth. It's just absurd. And the fact is, for these guys to be up there saying, oh, there needs to be special authority to fix this. Okay, well, you're the legislators, put it in place. And the reason they don't want to put it in place is because they don't want to fix the problem. And it's easier to go, oh, we don't have this mystical, magical authority, and ask for things that they know the Republicans will never let them get, because it allows them to continue to have this crisis be ongoing along the border.
I think you should look into trademarking the term the Goldman treatment, that will be your intellectual property and you can use it every time it's used going forward.
Well, what's funny? I was sharing text messages with Tom Homan after this happened, and I said, hey, Tom, I actually gave Goldman the Homan AOC treatment, and he got a kick out of that. So I was disappointed that AOC, I think, is on this committee, and I think Cori Bush is as well, and or at least they've waved onto it in the past, and neither one of them showed up. I was a little offended.
So we had another congressman who, like you, is no wallflower on this issue. This is William Timmons from South Carolina. He had some interesting things to say. Let's play that.
Is it within President Biden's executive authority to reinstate remand in Mexico, to end catch and release, and to continue construction of the border wall, all of which he stopped within weeks of being sworn in? Can he do that right now?
Yes, he can. As a matter of fact, I think stopping construction on the border wall might not have even been lawful.
Does Congress need to do anything to address 90% of this problem? We don't need a law. We need a man at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue that doesn't know where he is or what his last name is to sign it.
Now, this is a simple matter of applying the Immigration and Nationality Act as Congress wrote it and following through on other legislation that Congress has passed, like those relating to building a wall. We've had the Secure Fence Act in place in at least since 2006, and there may have been an earlier version of that.
And again, walking away from the negotiated terms that President Trump had with Mexico, saying they created a National Guard. They said you're going to have to deploy tens of thousands of soldiers to secure your side of the border. And by the way, all these people that are coming over, that are trying to come into our country illegally to get asylum for some whatever credible fear means to anybody that cares about it, no, you can come and try, but you're going to stay in Mexico until you get your hearing, which, by the way, is 2, 4, 6, 8 years away. So, look, I'm just so thankful that my colleagues across the aisle agree this is a problem now. I'm just so thankful. But you're not going to blame this on Trump, and you're not going to blame this on the Republicans in Congress, because all President Biden has to do is sign his damn name. That's all he has to do. Problem solved. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
So Early is a 501c3 organization. We don't advocate for any political candidate. We educate the public about policies. And so the issue here is not Trump v. Biden. It's really what is the authority that is inherent in the office of president and of the president and is given by statute by Congress to regulate the border. And the Supreme Court has been abundantly clear on numerous occasions that the border implicates the foreign affairs powers and the war powers. So there's certain powers inherent in those presidential functions that gives the president authority to manage the border, even in the absence of a statute. However, the Supreme Court has also said that regulating the border belongs to the political branches of government, meaning Congress and the president. And so when Congress delegates authority to the president is able to exercise that authority. And so, as we said when we started this whole thing, 1182F that was at issue in Trump v. Hawaii is a segment of the Immigration and Nationality Act that has been on the books for quite a long time. And it basically says that the president can take a look at the border anytime and say, whoa, this group of people, or even say anybody coming into the United States at the current time is not in the interests of the United States. And therefore, with the stroke of a pen, by presidential proclamation, the president can say, no, I'm shutting it down. I'm shutting it down for this group of people, or I'm shutting the whole thing down. And for some reason, the open borders contingent, which on this committee happen to be represented primarily by Democrats, but there are also plenty of Republicans that, push for a variety of reasons to have more people coming into the United States. They don't want to accept that the president has this power. And the current administration has refused to enforce any of the immigration laws that are on the books. They keep telling everyone, oh, we have to let all these people in to apply for asylum, despite the fact that most of what these people are saying when they're interviewed by immigration officials is that they're not really seeking asylum. They're seeking relief from bad economic conditions, or they're seeking employment opportunities that don't exist at home.
So this question came up several times during your hearing, whether the chief executive has the power. And the White House has messaged this a lot in the past couple of weeks, that pass this bill and just give him the power and then he'll do what he needs to do. But we're saying here that that's not the case. So why are they drawing that line? Is it they want to give themselves cover for the fact that they've created this problem over the last 3 years or dramatically worsened it?
Yeah, that's part of it. They want to give themselves cover. The other thing is that the open borders contingent for a long time has been trying to create a private right of action whereby someone who is outside of the United States, if they're excluded from the United States or if they're, outside, come in, make it through immigration and customs, and then are immediately ejected because of something that they did, that they have a right of action in a U.S. court, which if you stop and think about it is ridiculous. I mean, if I'm in France and I think that my motor vehicle accident case would be settled better under American law, I don't get to remove it to the United States and have it heard in Washington, D.C. If you're out of the United States, you're out of the jurisdiction of the United States, unless you're a U.S. citizen or a company doing business in the United States. And you don't have the same rights at law as somebody who is outside. So there's a Supreme Court case called Kleindienst versus Mandel, where the Supreme Court said flat out, unadmitted non-resident aliens have no constitutional claim to admission to the United States or any other claim of admission to the United States unless the government gives them permission to enter. The other side has been working diligently to try and create this argument. It's the same argument that was dealt with in Trump v. Hawaii, that there are limits on the power of the U.S. government and government officials to bar the entry of people coming into the United States. But that's absurd. And then we go all the way back to a case called ECU v. United States that was decided in 1892, where the Supreme Court said that as a matter of national sovereignty and international law recognized by all the other countries in the world, every sovereign country has the right to determine what foreign nationals can enter its territory, the circumstances under which they can do so, and how long they can stay. So this is cover for screwing up the border, but they also want to put in place this notion that anyone who says the magic A word, asylum, has a right that is protected at law to enter the United States and seek asylum. That's not true. I mean, as a matter of international law, this is even recognized by the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, states are required to have an asylum system available under the relevant treaty to which the U.S. is a party. However, they don't have to let anyone in, nor do they have to give asylum to any specific person. Asylum is 100% discretionary. When I was an immigration judge, I could determine, yes, Brian Lonergan, you do qualify for asylum from Ireland because they're persecuting you for your beer drinking habits or whatever. But because of other factors, I am determining that as a matter of discretion, you don't merit a grant of asylum, and therefore I'm not giving it to you. And I would have been 100% correct in that decision.
Now, other than Goldman, there were very few Democrat congressmen who asked you direct questions. While you were at that table, did you get any sense of genuine intellectual curiosity among those congressmen to get to the problem, or was it just fealty to the White House right down the line or something in between?
It's interesting that you phrased it as genuine intellectual curiosity. I generally find that people who want open borders have a very loose relationship with the concept of objective truth, and they tend to emote. So they think that we should let everybody in because it gives them the feels, and they think it's nice. But they're not taking into account that we have hundreds of thousands of people who we have no idea who they are, and we have no reasonable capacity to vet them streaming into the United States. And as a number of the members mentioned, we don't know if they're Chinese Special Forces. We don't know if they're Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. We don't know if they're Venezuelan intelligence service. We just don't know who these folks are. So, no, I don't think there was an ounce in the pro-open borders contingent on that panel, an ounce of intellectual curiosity. If there was, they would have read the statute, read the Supreme Court decision in Trump v. Hawaii, and they would have realized that the questions they were asking, were all just another version of Goldman's dumb question, because the Supreme Court has spoken on this. The president has the authority to do this. It's very rare that the Supreme Court, in an opinion, will say this statute exudes deference to the president. And it's very rare that they will so explicitly say that, no, by the terms of the statute, the president can determine who he's going to exclude, why he's going to do it, when he's going to do it, and for how long he's going to continue to do it. And yet that's what the Trump v. Hawaii decision said in clear, non-legalistic, uncertain, plain English terms.
Judge O'Brien, thank you for your legal analysis, but when did you become such a cold, hard-hearted person who hates children who don't look like you? Something like that?
Well, I see. This goes back to something that I call the Not America factor. That 70s show that used to be on Fox had the father of the family, Red, used to refer to Fez, the exchange student, as that kid from Not America, because he could never remember where Fez was from. And they, of course, left Fez's national origin as kind of a big secret throughout the show as part of the joke. But really what immigration is about doesn't have anything to do with race, religion, or someone's appearance. It has to do with the world is, for immigration purposes, is divided into two spheres. There's America and not America. And if your citizenship lies somewhere in not America, then you can be excluded from the United States because you're not a citizen. And presumably you have a country somewhere where you have full rights of citizenship and you are free to enter and leave that country at will. The mere fact that you don't like that country is not a reason for you to be able to relocate to the United States. And one of the UN entities did a poll, I think, along with the Gallup polling organization a few years back, and they said that there were something along the lines of 700 million people in the world who would relocate if they were given the opportunity. And the top two destination countries were the United States, followed by Canada. And then thereafter, it was places like Australia, New Zealand, France, Italy, Germany. We can't hold 700 million people. And why should we have to? I mean, this is our country. Nobody has any problem with the Japanese wanting to remain Japanese and have Japanese culture be the dominant culture and the Japanese language be the dominant language. But for some reason, when people in the United States, which has a unique culture which flows from, the culture of the British Isles, when we want to do that, it's bad and it's horrible and it's racist. And those contentions are just absurd.
So, Matt, needless to say, your performance up there created a few waves in the online community. There was a post on X that we're going to look at here. Who posted this and what's their story?
This was the director of policy at the American Immigration Lawyers Association, which is the trade association for attorneys who represent aliens in immigration proceedings. And, typically you don't find that the Criminal Bar Association is campaigning to eliminate all laws against murder, because if they did so, they'd find themselves without any work. But for some reason, the American Immigration Lawyers Association has always been stridently partisan in terms of making it easier to get into the United States, which is kind of strange for a trade association, because if it's easier to get into the United States, nobody needs immigration lawyers.
So here's what he wrote. This entire exchange is a headache of bad info. O'Brien is wrong about 212F and doesn't appear to even know that Trump tried and failed badly to use it at the southern border. Goldman also doesn't seem to know this fact, so he doesn't respond as he should. A miss all around. Your response?
So this is this thing that has been floating around among the anti-borders folks, and I don't quite understand it, because Trump did not try and use this to cut off asylum applications, although he could have, and that's made abundantly clear by the Trump v. Hawaii holding. He used it to cut off the admission of people from countries where terrorism was running rampant. And of course, the knuckleheads at ALA, accompanied by a number of other groups, sued about this. So he hasn't cited any case where Trump was allegedly prevented from using this at the southern border. If he's talking about the case that Trump lost in at the circuit court and then it went to the Supreme Court, he really should give back his law diploma and his bar certificate, because the fact that the Supreme Court ruled on the issue renders the lower court holding null and void. And the Supreme Court was very clear that the lower court got this wrong and that the statute, and I can't emphasize this enough, exudes deference to the President of the United States. So what I think this goes back to, and this is very typical of the sort of open borders radicals, when they do this, they say, oh yeah, you can't do that. The president can't use this to block asylum. But then they don't tell you why. And it's just because they don't want him to do that. It hits him in the feels somehow that that's bad. And that's not how law is practiced. So I think what this goes back to, again, is their argument would probably be, well, he can't use this on asylum because there is a right to seek asylum. But there isn't a right to seek asylum, and asylum seekers are a class of aliens, and 1182F is very broad. It says that the president can temporarily suspend the admission as immigrants or non-immigrants of any aliens or class of aliens. And then in the next sentence, it refers to suspending the admission of all aliens. So it's not clear to me where they're getting this twisted legal reasoning that they're applying to this, say, oh no, Trump couldn't use that to shut down the border. And when he tried to do it at the southern border, he was shut down. Okay, fine. Cite me chapter and verse and explain to me why this is not the case. And of course they can't do it because they're wrong. They're peddling a fantasy.
So when the current administration says we can't secure the border the way we need to, give us more power to do it, isn't that contradicted by the fact that the previous administration did a lot of things that improved the security at the border, but the things that they did, like remain in Mexico, build a more fortified barrier at the border, the current administration doesn't want to do. So they envision something else as far as the powers they should have. And what would they result in if they had them?
I'm not sure they'd result in anything because they don't have an interest in doing anything. So I don't know why they're saying they need more power to do this. The power is on the books already. As a matter of fact, there is, I think, a 2018 or 2019 Congressional Research Service report that addressed this whole issue ahead of the Trump v. Hawaii decision, or it might have been right after Trump v. Hawaii was issued. And it cites like 35, 40 other instances of restrictions being placed on the border. And almost all of them were based on other statutory provisions, ranging from, public health to, financial crime related. I mean, there's a chart, and we can put a link in the description for this edition of the podcast, but it goes through bunches upon bunches of these. So this argument that they somehow need special authority to do this is just completely disingenuous. And I think the simple fact of the matter is that this administration ran on a ticket where they said they were going to reverse the prior administration's immigration policies, and they actively encouraged people to come to the United States. They would have you believe that it's some type of misplaced interest in civil rights and protecting the downtrodden of the world and all of the, allegedly black and brown people that make up the bulk of immigrants, which is, if you spend any time at the border, that's absurd because there's 170 countries. So you're getting people from all across the spectrum. It looks like Disney's It's a Small World ride because there are people literally coming from, I think there's 194 countries now, and we've had people from 170 of them come here. And the 20 plus countries that people aren't coming from there probably aren't a whole bunch of people leaving Norway to come to the United States illegally over the border. And there's a few countries like North Korea where nobody's permitted to leave because it's such a Marxist paradise. Why would anyone want to go? So, this whole thing is just, it's never been clearly explained to me what authority they think it is that they're missing. And this bipartisan border bill that Raskin was harping on about during the hearing that would have supposedly given them authority to deal with this actually confers significantly less authority than is currently on the books now. And it wasn't clear when I read the bill to what extent it would conflict with the current law and to what extent it would just be an additional grant of lesser authority that would still be superseded by the laws that are on the books.
Shouldn't Americans be wary of these sweeping immigration reform bills? Because we can all remember back to 86 amnesty when we were promised increased border security. We got the amnesty, but we didn't really get the increased border security, did we?
No. Not remotely. Yeah. And the increased restrictions on, or I should say penalties on employers that hire illegal aliens and the increased restrictions on illegal aliens seeking jobs never came to pass. But what a lot of people don't realize is the Eisenhower administration perceived that there was a problem with illegal immigration to the United States at a certain point. And they mounted an operation. People can go look up the name. It's not politically correct anymore what they titled it, but at the time, nobody considered it a problem. And they removed, I want to say 100,000 or more illegal migrants, because we don't say the A word anymore, but illegal migrants from the United States within a couple of weeks' time, and essentially hit the reset button. And at the time that everyone was pushing for the amnesty, there really weren't a whole lot of illegal aliens in the United States. Why? Because the laws that we had on the books, when they were enforced properly, were actually working. So the amnesty came along, and the people who wanted the amnesty said, oh, we need to have this because people are in the shadows and they can't come out. They've been a part of our communities and they need a path to citizenship. And so the government put out the forms, published all the requisite notices, and sat back and waited for the applications to come in. And guess what happened? None of the applications came in. Why? Because there weren't that many people that were here illegally. So the people who were in favor of the amnesty said, oh, no, it's all because they're hiding. They're afraid. They don't trust the government. And so what happened was, like the Special Agricultural Worker Program, there were farm labor brokers chartering flights in Jamaica and bringing people here who applied for benefits under the amnesty program by providing bogus evidence that they had been unlawfully present in the United States for the required 3 months prior to the passage of the statute you had to have in order to qualify. Now, stop and think about this for a moment. This is just, in terms of the law, this is just complete, utter, total, mind-boggling stupidity, because how do you prove a negative fact? I mean, you can prove you were admitted to the United States lawfully because the U.S. government gives you a document that says you're admitted in this class and you can stay for this amount of time. But evidence that you were here illegally was like your children's school records, a handwritten note from a farm saying they employed you. And, we saw these crazy things. I was working when a lot of these cases came up for green cards and naturalization. They became temporary provisional residents and then were allowed to become permanent residents and then applied for citizenship. And I had a woman who told me she went from Ghana to Ontario in a boat and then took a boat from Ontario to Miami in 2.5 hours. And she then provided me with documentation saying that she worked on a farm in Springfield, Massachusetts, and her job was to pick corn from the corn trees and strawberries from the strawberry trees. And this was extremely difficult because she was working in January and February and she didn't have any shoes, and the branches of the corn and strawberry trees were icy, so people fell a lot. God's honest truth. I'm not making this up. You can't make this stuff up. And so all of these people got status in the United States, even though they hadn't been here. It was an orgy of fraud. And so the message got out to all of the people who were contemplating coming to the United States and didn't because they didn't want to be caught in the next Eisenhower-style sweep. And they all got on planes and they all started walking toward the southern border and they all came to the United States. So the amnesty is the genesis of the illegal alien problem that we have now. Amnesties are the giant magnet, and this administration has been using the big A word, amnesty, nonstop. I believe they told the migrants to surge the border, come on in. And so what's happening? There's the scent of amnesty in the air, and people are coming over the border in droves. You didn't have this problem with the Eisenhower approach. You had this problem. It started with the amnesty program.
So, Matt, in closing, this isn't a golden era of transparency in government right now we're living in. So what were your takeaways when you were leaving that room?
Well, there were a couple of them. I mean, first, I think fireworks get people to sit up and pay attention. Second of all, the government might not be working at its absolute best right now, but I think this was an example of how the Republican form of government, small r, actually works. Because what happened? There were legislators who needed information on this. They wanted that information to get to the public, and they called for witnesses. And Jessica Vaughn from the Center for Immigration Studies, who we know well and have known for years, is reliable. I was there, and this Hauser guy didn't know anything about immigration. He had to defer on a number of the things that he was asked about. On the other hand, the people sitting to his right, Jessica and I, actually have huge amounts of experience in this and knowledge. And so if they were listening, the public got the truth. And that's the most important aspect of this. So, everybody's high school civics teacher told them C-SPAN isn't boring. You should watch it and see what's going on. It's the truth. And all of this stuff is up on the web, and it's accessible where people can find it. So I think people are genuinely worried about this issue. And if they're genuinely worried, what they need to do is they need to inform themselves about it. And then they need to communicate with their legislators, regardless of what their opinion is or what side of the issue they're on. American government works by people letting their elected representatives know what they want.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that is not going to be your last appearance testifying on the Hill.
I hope not. It was interesting, and I always enjoyed the opportunity to set people straight about their misperceptions about things immigration related. So I hope they'll ask me to do it again, but we'll see. Thanks for tuning in to the No Border, No Country podcast. You can find us all over the web, particularly at Spotify, on X, and on YouTube. Please tune in, stab the like button, stab the subscribe button, And if you'd like to get more information on Early and what we do, you can take a look at www.early.org, our website, and there's a place there to make a donation if you'd like to support the work that Early does.